Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to the show. So, we have a very amazing co host who's going to be helping me out today, Mr. David Little. I'm going to introduce him shortly. I'm your host, Shelbie Morgan of the Hustle, Budget, and Glow podcast. As you know, this is straight talk and money and mindset. I always have an entrepreneur on the show. And I love switching it up and having people from different backgrounds. I'm super excited to have somebody from the real estate industry on the call. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mr. David Little. David, go ahead and take it away. Tell people where you're from, a little bit about you and what you do. Go ahead. Let's go.
Sure. Well, first off, Shelby, thank you for the opportunity to come on the podcast. I really appreciate you helping me kind of get my name out there and our business out there as well. I'm proud of what we've built, so always happy to talk about it. But my background is in engineering, actually. I always had an interest in real estate, and so as soon as I started my engineering role on a full-time basis, I started doing different avenues, different investments in the real estate world, and bounced around to quite a few different ventures and projects till I ultimately found private lending, which is what I'm specialized and focused on today. And me and my business partner started our company up, Crown Capital Resources, 7 years ago. And we basically ran it on nights and weekends. It was a solid side hustle for us for right around 7 years until about a year ago, almost to the day, I resigned from my engineering role and decided to pursue it full time. So we've been doing it for a long time, but for a very short period of time, actually on a full time basis. So definitely kind of in a new inning of my life. And things have changed for me both personally and professionally with this jump, all for the better. And so, yeah, I'm just excited to talk about that today and kind of go down both my personal story and hopefully give your viewers a little bit of perspective on my journey and how it could be applicable to theirs as well.
For sure. No, we're going to have a lot of fun today. We want to hear about your story, your journey. And yeah, that's such a huge jump, right? From engineering to real estate. And right now in your current business, and then you did the side hustle for 7 years. So I have an array of questions, but first I'll start with, when did you know it was time to make the switch to be from an engineer to go full time? And are there still things about engineering that you love and or miss?
Yeah. So I will say this. Let me tackle the second part of your question first. There are some things that you do end up missing, mostly centered around the people that you used to work with on a day-to-day basis. But there has not been a single day since I've resigned from my engineering role that I have missed it because the positives so far outweigh the things that I miss about it or the things that, yeah, that was kind of a fun deal about the job. So there's no nostalgia there, to be honest. Um, Now, for the first part of your question, yeah, it's interesting, and this question is fundamentally kind of that turning point that every entrepreneur needs to make and say, am I ready to jump or not? Now, for me, like you said, I'm a lot more analytical, and it had to basically check two boxes. The first of which was a quantifiable box. I wanted to make more money in my side hustle than in my primary job before I jumped,
Right.
and it took a long time to do that. Right? For us, it was 7 years to where we had to slowly build this company up to where the income of the side hustle and income of the main hustle finally crossed. Took a long time. And then the second, maybe even more importantly, was I actually went through a bit of a rabbit hole of personal exploration and really tried to distill out what the most important thing to me was in a career. Because money is never the right answer. Like money's always people's default answer,
Right.
but the reality is, if you think deeply about it, it's going to be something else. And so as I worked through that exercise for myself personally, I realized that the most important thing that I was really seeking was autonomy over my own time. And once I had that realization, it came with a secondary realization that was no matter how good a W 2 job ever is, you will never have autonomy over your own time. And then arguably, it's kind of the inverse relationship because as you move up into a corporate organization, you have less and less of that over time. So it's like you're succeeding from a corporate perspective, but you're kind of penalized from a quality of your own time and autonomy over your own time perspective. So that to me was the clear demarcation line, and I realized this is the right move for me. But those were my two check boxes. That was my answer.
100%. Yeah, I feel like you gotta kind of put it in perspective, right? Perspective is everything.
Yeah,
For me, the number one thing I love is my freedom, right?
yeah,
I like to wake up and start my day how I want. I like to travel when I want. I like to spend time with my family and my friends when I want. And you're right, the higher you go in the role, the more, high end your role is, the more you climb the corporate ladder.
yeah,
Yeah, you're making more, you're getting a higher title, but the time spent, the traveling, the waking up when you want, how you want, you can have work-life balance all you want. You gotta do that as an entrepreneur because as an entrepreneur, your mind doesn't cut
yeah,
off. You're always working. You're working in your sleep, but it's different when you're working for someone else because you don't have
yeah,
that control over your time. So walking away is honestly, in my mind, walking forward, right?
yeah,
Because I mean, I haven't worked at my corporate job in 8 months. I don't miss corporate America. Like you said, there's no nostalgia. I do appreciate the friendships I develop and the lifelong relationships I'll always have. But am I going to go back? I don't know. Right now, I'm just freelancing, doing my own thing as an entrepreneur. But at
yeah,
the same time, like you said, like when you walk away, the money aspect is great, but you have to also make sure you have enough money to be okay
yeah,
when you walk away, because a lot of people walk away without a plan of how am I gonna take care of myself and my family financially. So, you made that decision, you saw once you hit that, threshold of, "I make as much, and now I make more than what I made in my job," like, I can walk away, but you do have to decide what matters to you, and I think for a lot of people, you're a millennial, I'm a millennial, Gen Zers, we're not our parents, we're not our grandparents, our freedom matters, we don't wanna wake up and
yeah,
we're 60, and now we can travel, now we can enjoy our life, like, we wanna start doing that now, and so we try to, like, set ourselves up for success, so I definitely feel like you did that and you checked those boxes. And I guess my other question is for you next up is what sparked your interest so much about real estate? You could have picked anything. What made you fall in love with real estate? Not even going into the lending part yet, but like what attracted you about it?
yeah. I think as I started the young engineer, real estate provides some interesting opportunities for somebody who doesn't have a lot of capital built up yet. Your relative, you especially, call it 15 years ago when I started buying rental properties, the rate of return that you could get, especially with leverage, was actually pretty significant. And so for me, it's like there's not a lot of avenues as a 23-year-old with not a ton of money saved up that you can go leverage capital to increase your returns. That was one thing. And then also it's kind of a nuts and bolts industry. I mean, you're buying a physical piece of property that ultimately like you can go out there and see it. Right. And so I really like that aspect of it early on, especially when I started buying rentals. I would go out there and do some of the handyman work myself. So I like that aspect of it. I like being able to actually go out there and see the properties and meet the tenants. And that's the sort of thing like and this ties into our mission statement of our company currently is when you're engaged in real estate, whether you're a landlord or whether you're capitalizing investors to go flip properties or whether you're building rent to own properties, like you are improving the quality of people's lives as well. And so, if you're flipping properties, you're improving the quality of a neighborhood as well. You're helping to revitalize it, to rebuild it, to make it more beautiful. And so there's there's that overarching aspect as well that I like about real estate. I mean, everybody has to live somewhere.
Right.
And to me, and to my family too, like living in a beautiful house is one of the things that's more of a non-negotiable in our lives. Like we like to have peace in our home. We like to have a home that we love to come back to, even when it's like a great vacation. I always love that when my wife and my kids will say, like, I'm ready to come back home. I'm like, yeah, me too. I think that's great because that's not a house, that's a home.
Right. And I think that says a lot, right? Like you said, looking forward to coming back to your home. I mean,
Yeah.
it's your space. Y'all have cultivated it how you want, right? It's not curated, right? Like how social media is. Social media is curated. It's made to be like something in an art gallery, right?
Yeah.
Most of it's not real, but you cultivated your own space, and so you look forward to it because it's your art gallery in your own way. But you can change the artwork however you want, and it's yours, right? So I can see that part about you loving it. And you're right; everybody has to live somewhere, so you might as well enjoy where you're at. And so I
Yeah.
do want to go over this so people can have an understanding. So when you're a tenant, a landlord, or somebody flipping property, explain the differences and what that looks like from an entrepreneurship perspective. Because some people only wanna do 1, some people do 2, some people do all 3 parts of those. So explain
Yeah.
that to people and what the differences are as an entrepreneur, and, like, also what is the easiest one to get into? Landlord, flipping it, let us know.
Um, this is probably kind of a contrarian answer. I think generally speaking, purchasing property and becoming a landlord can be a relatively passive one. I think it's on the easier side because you could essentially define out what box you have. You could get a rental CMA and a property CMA. So you have a good idea of the property type you want to purchase, the rents that are going to come in, and you can run a relatively straightforward financial forecast of what that's going to look like on a cash flow basis. I think generally speaking, there's a lot more knowns in that, and that generally speaking, there's a lot more help, such as property managers, where you could actually go purchase, get this property set up, get a tenant in there, and then you could pass it off to a property management company to where you're not even thinking about it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So I actually think that's about the lowest barrier to entry. Um, I think the more difficult one, or one of the most difficult one, is actually flipping and actively managing the property yourself. And I think that HGTV has ruined people to thinking it's very easy.
Right.
But the reality is, when you're going in and you're putting a $60,000, $80,000 renovation on a property, and you're going and you're opening up walls and you're going and exposing electrical and plumbing, the myriad of things that can go wrong and inevitably do go wrong is so much more than people ever budget for on their financial forecast. And so that aspect is really tough from a forecasting perspective. And then the other aspect is, especially if you're a newbie, you're pulling in a crew that you've never worked before. There's some tough personalities on contracting crews and people not showing up for work, and just a lot of drama from that perspective. So I think flipping is not a newbie game. I think that people that go in and flip in it, and we have new clients of ours that will fund, that's their first or second flip, and I'll tell them, hey, like, this is, don't mentally go into this project thinking it's going to be a home run. Like,
Right.
thinking you're going to make $60,000. Like, you need to mentally go into this project and think, I'm going to break even. I'm going to barely hit a single. And at the end of it, like, I learned a ton. I got better contacts with my crews. I understand how the financing works from a private lending perspective. And so now my second to fourth one, then maybe I want to get us some profit on those, because you're probably not going to be hitting 40, 50, 60,000 in profit until you've done maybe half a dozen, maybe more, and you've got a crew consistently running, and you're potentially got a good GC. So flipping is a really hard thing in the real estate industry. And then there's a ton of different things as well. I mean, there's raw property, land development, there's wholesaling, there's private lending, which is what I'm doing now. So before I actually landed in what I'm doing now, which is hard money lending or private lending, I did a bunch of the different things, right? So I had the rental properties, and I did the Airbnb, acquisition and rentals as well. I did the raw land development. So when I did, that's the thing about real estate, just like anything that, industry is, it's incredibly broad. And so what I tell people going on, first getting into the real estate industry is, you just need to try a bunch of different things, and you need to be okay mentally saying, hey, I'm going to try this, and maybe it's not for me, because I went in thinking I just want to own 50 single family homes and cash flow them. And then a few years into that, I realized, man, this is such a grind. Even with a property management company, it was always just seemingly always a headache for me. And I was like, man, the profits that I'm getting into this is not worth the time and the headaches that this is actually causing me. So I went in thinking one thing in real estate, and I was completely wrong. But it's okay. I sold that, I pivoted, and that's what I would tell people.
Got you.
You got to
Okay.
you got to figure out you got to figure out where your passion lies.
Okay, yeah, because it seems like there's so many different paths you can take, and
Yeah.
so, like you said, the landlord part is like for anyone who wants to get their feet. Well, let's just say somebody like me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Never owned a property. Like for me, my interest in what I'm thinking now in the next like 2 years is like I would love to get a duplex and live on one side of it, and have the other tenant like pay a percentage, right, and like help me with
Yeah.
costs, and I make a profit. For me, that's the best, easiest way of entry. What do you think about that? Do I have the right thought process behind that? I know it's way easier said than done, but like how does that's what a lot of people like to do to start off
Yeah.
with it. So can you kind of walk us through what that looks like?
Yeah. So generally speaking, in today's markets with heightened interest rates, I would say that multifamily properties cash flow a lot better than single family properties, because there's efficiencies within the building structure itself. Um, so what we see, typically speaking, the properties that are cash flowing really well are duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, things like that. I have heard anecdotally, and what you're thinking is, when you pick the right tenant, it's a dream scenario. You love the person that you're sharing a wall with. They're paying rent on time. It's fantastic. It's all good. When you pick the wrong tenant, it becomes a real nightmare, right? So that would be my number one advice. I think a lot of people, especially when they're starting out and they're looking at renting a property, the number one priority that they have is I have to get this rented immediately, which I get it. I mean, you've got a mortgage payment, it's due on the first every month. But what I would tell people is really slow down and pick the right tenant, because at minimum you're stuck with them for a year. But if you pick the right tenant, I had rentals too. I had rentals where I had picked the right person and they were in there from the day I purchased it and 7 years later to the day I sold it. I mean, that's like your best case, best tenant.
Right.
And so that's what I would say. Like, the stakes are higher in what you're thinking. The cash flow will be better because duplexes, triplexes, cash flow better. I think that's smart. Um, but just make sure it's like when you rent that duplex to somebody, think like, hey, you don't have to be best friends with this, but is this a person that I'm okay sharing a wall with, sharing half my house with? So be
Right.
patient, pick the right person, because yeah, it could be a great scenario.
Yeah, definitely going to do quite a thorough HR interview because
Yes.
as the only child who's um I live in an apartment now, but like I always try to make sure I have a good rapport with my neighbors because I mean, sometimes you can hear things like the people that live next door to me. I have their number. If I'm loud or they're loud, we just have like an honor code, like just text the person or call. So I feel like it's just again, I didn't get to pick who moves next door to me. I just got somebody really great. But in this scenario where it's different and money really is involved, my money is on the line, then I definitely would want to interview them because I'm very particular as somebody who's
Yeah.
never lived with anybody and grew up without any siblings. Like I have certain expectations of how I want my space to be. And like, mind you, you can tear that up if you want to a certain extent, but like I think just certain cadences would be very important to me. And like I want to have a good rapport. Like I hate to say this, but like their personality matters, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
it really
absolutely.
does. Because if we're going to be having conversations, or I'm going to be helping you through things that happen, we need to be able to communicate effectively. So
Yeah.
your personality and your rapport and your demeanor are super important. So glad you said that. What do you see people doing more of? Duplexes, triplexes, or quad? Did you say quadplexes? What are they called?
Yeah. 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 Mhm.
What do people do more of in today's world?
Well, the vast majority of our clients are still doing single family home flips. And really our loan product is best suited for exactly that. I'm purchasing a house,
Mhm.
I'm renovating it and I'm putting it back on the market. Within that whole process, hopefully I'm taking 4 to 5 months. It's a quick short-term loan is really the niche that we offer. Um, but when we underwrite these properties, so we go and we evaluate them both on an appraisal basis and from a rent comp basis as well. What we're seeing in the data today is that, generally speaking, the multifamily units, um, which let's call it, you know, 2 to 4 to 6 plus, those are actually cash flowing better than single family homes right now.
Okay.
Single family home rentals are as this is a very obvious statement, but they're very, very sensitive to interest rates, right? Because that's your biggest cost is your mortgage payment to the bank.
Okay. So these people that are flipping the houses and doing the single family home, you're saying the range is 4 to 5 months. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I'll speak a little bit more to that in exactly what Crown Capital, the niche that we fill. Um, Essentially, so anytime you hear the word hard money lender or private lender, what that essentially means is a company that's willing to put a loan out on a property. So that's what makes it hard money, is there's a hard collateral asset attached to the loan,
Okay.
right? And so anything that we fund, we hold first lien position on. And so the niche that we offer, we actually don't compete with banks at all. Because if somebody's going out and they're going to go buy a distressed property, there's really two reasons why a bank would never touch it. The first of which is banks don't lend on distressed properties; they lend on stabilized properties.
Tell people
And
what a
then,
property is. Tell people what that is.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're the properties that you would see on Zillow or on Realtor.com that it says like investor special, and you go look at the pictures, and half the kitchen's torn out, and maybe there's a wall halfway missing. There's some electrical. It's got either structural or cosmetic issues that really need to be remedied if you wanted to get top dollar in a market.
Got you.
And so, as you can imagine, a bank would never lend on those. But another reason flippers don't care about banks is because, let's say the flipper were to go talk to a bank, and even if they were to lend on a distressed property, they would go, okay, sounds great. Our underwriting process funding is going to be 45 days. By that time, the property's gone. So we fill a niche in the market. What a flipper can do is call a hard money lender like ourselves and say, "Hey, I've got a flip. Can you underwrite it? Can you fund this thing?" And we can typically underwrite and fund within 48 hours. So it's incredibly quick process. And they can go in there and make a cash offer, right? Because they're using our cash and close on a property within a few business days. And that's why we underwrite for 6 months, because their goal as the flipper is I got to get in, I got to get this thing renovated and back on the market and sold as fast as possible. And we want short loans and they want short loans. So there's a very aligned incentives there. But this market in Texas is huge. A lot of people don't realize this. And we recently just subscribed to a service that pulls this data. In Texas alone, in 2024, there were $17 billion worth of hard money loans done throughout the year. So it's a massive market.
Billion.
And we're like 0.14% of the market. So we're an incredibly small player. Um, but it's a good loan product. And another way to think about what we do and why would people would do it is to think about it this way, Shelby. Let's say you're a flipper and you've got $400,000 of cash in the Austin market. The reality is you're probably just flipping one house at a time, right? You're paying your own cash for it. You're doing your own remodel. You're paying for all that. And by the end of the year, maybe you've flipped two properties. And so instead, what these flippers do is they'll go partner with a hard money lender like ourselves and say, "Hey, I want to put 50, 60K into each of these deals." And now they're able to run, instead of one project at a time, maybe four projects at a time, maybe five projects at a time. And then at the end of the year, even though on a net property basis, their margins are lower because they had to pay interest to
Mhm.
us, they did 10 projects. They finished 10 flips instead of two.
Instead of
So
two.
that's really our value add into the space, is to say, hey, you can leverage your cash in order to do more projects. And then, of course, there's economies built into that as well. Like there's economies in keeping crews busy. There's economies in being able to standardize your design and buy materials in bulk and things like that. So that's basically the niche in which we fill.
Okay. And so in this process, are y'all helping at all with finding the crew, finding the products that they need? Do you have resources to help them with these other parts, or you're just strictly doing the hard money lending?
So we've got resources for people. Like we're always happy to recommend people, but we don't manage anything operationally. They run their own flip.
Got you. So you take yourself out of that. You're strictly focused
Yes.
on the lending prospect. And so on the ratio, so you're making money off of giving them the loan and you're making money off the interest rate that they're going to have to
Yes.
pay you
Mhm.
back. Got you. And so if they're only flipping one or two properties and they're just starting out, like you said, they're not really seeing any like capital gain until they've done like two or three. So are you taking on people that are entry level that are doing their first
Yeah.
property, but they're not
Yeah,
making any?
we do.
Okay.
No, we do, that's kind of another value add that we provide, is because if somebody brings us a project from at origination, says, "Hey, I'm thinking I want to flip this house," another value add of partnering with a hard money lender as well is we go internally underwrite and evaluate that. So we'll go pull inventory levels in the area, we'll go pull comps through the MLS, and then we'll come back to them and say, "Hey, I think this looks like a pretty solid deal. Here's your term sheet." Or sometimes we come back to them and say, "Hey, I would not recommend doing this deal because of X, Y, and Z reason."
Okay.
In fact, we just had this tough conversation with one of our flippers the other day. He wanted to remodel a home, and what we had said to him was, "Well, uh, you're basically the level that you're going to bring this home to and the price point. You're competing with a subdivision with brand new homes, 3 blocks away. And so, if anyone's looking to go out here and spend $400,000, I can almost guarantee they're going to go pick their finish out, move into a new brand new home than to say move into a 35-year-old home that's been remodeled." So that's the sort of stuff that we help newer flippers with as well, is to have a second set of eyes on your project before you go out and go acquire a property.
So like in that scenario, at some point, someone is going to have to flip that house. And
Sure.
so who would you recommend going after something like that? So that's going to have to compete with the subdivision regardless. Who should their target audience be?
Yeah, I think there's a few options. There's option A would be somebody who could just kind of there's really two, I guess. There's somebody who's a more experienced flipper that can dramatically decrease the rehab budget and actually move below that price point to incentivize buyers to pick that house over maybe the new builds. And then B, sometimes it's the person who may not want to flip that house, but maybe who wants to keep it long term as a rental, right?
Okay.
So that usually looks a little bit different too. They might not be doing the 60, $70,000 rehab. They might be doing the $35,000 rehab because they're not going all out on the finishes. They're getting it not sales ready, but rental ready, which is two different things, as you can imagine.
Right. Okay. So tell us a little bit more about that. Sales ready versus rental ready. What are we looking at as far as the aesthetic standpoint? If you walk in.
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is if you're renovating a property that's essentially going to be a rental, is you're more concerned about mid-grade finishes and wear and things that are going to handle wear and tear.
Okay.
Um, the like one easy example I would give you is they're going to choose maybe like a vinyl or a luxury laminate over a engineered hardwood on the flooring, right? Aesthetically, it's a little bit different. It's similar-ish, but from a wear and tear basis, they just don't care as much. And then the second thing to think about too is when you're going out and you're a real estate investor and all you want to do is keep it as a rental, when you pull comps, you're not pulling comps of things that have sold, you're pulling comps of other rentals on the market. And so it behooves you to stay within those mid-level finishes of what the other things are renting for. Now, if you're in a really great market, and obviously there's some areas in Austin where this is applicable, and you were to say, hey, as it turns out, the other rentals in this area have, quartzite countertops, they have beautiful engineered hardwood floorings, white oak cabinetry, that's the level that you need to get to, right? But
Right.
again, you're looking at rental comps, not sales comps. And sometimes they're the same, but usually they're not.
Okay. I understand that. Okay. Thank you for letting people know about that. And so I have a question. So someone that's a real estate agent, right? That is, helping people buy a home and, where they're beginning their real estate career in the first 5 years. Do you see a lot of those people transitioning into lending and going the route that you took? Or where do you see them typically going? Like, let's just say I was a real estate agent and I wanted to transition my career and do what you do. Do you see that happening a lot?
So we see people doing both in our experience. Real estate agents come across really good deals. And so the way we think about it, there's actually a whole client segment that we have that I would characterize them as full-time real estate agents and part-time flippers. And
Okay.
so the beauty of what these guys do is they are in these neighborhoods day in and day out, driving the streets and meeting neighbors and whatnot. And every once in a while, they come across a really good deal and they're able to submit a cash offer far under market value. And so these flips usually look a little bit different than the hardcore flipper, right? Instead of being 60, 70, $80,000 flips, they're usually primarily cosmetic. So they might be a $10,000 rehab budget. But
Oh,
their
okay.
whole goal is, hey, I bought this house right. I bought it way under market value. I just got to kind of do some cosmetic things to get it up to looking pretty good. And then I want to flip it really quick. So the way
Okay.
that would look is I'm a real estate agent. I'm going around these neighborhoods and I'm pretty consistently making cash offers way under market value. And maybe every 20 offers, one gets accepted. And when that gets accepted, they call us and they say, hey, I got a great deal on this property. Can you guys fund it? It's closing in 10 days. No problem. So we'll underwrite it. We'll say, we agree it's a great deal. They pick up that property, they do a quick cosmetic rehab, and they throw it right back on the market.
In 10 days.
So,
That's such a quick turnaround.
well, not the flip in 10 days, the funding in 10 days.
Okay. And so they do all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
cosmetic. They put it back on the market within 10 days though.
Oh, no, no, I'm sorry. They'll close in 10 days. Because
Gotcha.
so keep in mind when you're partnered with a hard money lender like ourselves, when you're making an offer, you're not saying, hey, I'd like to make an offer on your house and it's contingent on bank financing and so on. So the way they're making an offer when they have hard money loan financing is they're calling up the seller and they're saying, I can make a cash offer on your house. I can close within 5 business days. Here's the offer. And they just send it out. And
Gotcha.
I mean, to be honest with you, like 10 times, yeah, maybe 14 times out of 15, the offer just gets ignored. And that's okay. I mean, these guys are putting out offers often, but every once in a while they get just a screaming great deal.
Wow. They get that one yes and that's it.
Yeah, they get that one. Yeah, and but it doesn't cost them any time because one of the guys that I know, he's driving around and as he sees a property that looks like it's not really well kept and maybe the yard's overgrown, he's thinking there's something there, right? A relative died or they're out of state owners or whatever. So he'll call his office and say, "Hey, I'm looking at 4114 hunters drive, make an offer, and he knows the market, so he knows on average the properties sell for $300,000. He'll tell them flat out, just make him an offer for $230,000. And it takes 5 minutes for his office manager to write up the offer and submit it. So it's easy.
It's easy, and, like, so they're definitely doing it undervalued, like you said, like,
Oh
they
yeah, yeah, yeah. But they're casting with a wide net.
got you, and that one person, maybe they wanna get out there, maybe it's their grandma's house, and they just like, "Damn, I'd love to make some money off of it. I'm not gonna move back there. I live in Chicago," wherever the case may be. I
Yeah,
might as well let it go.
yeah. It's a lot of that.
It's a lot of
It's a
that.
lot of that. And
Oh,
the telltale sign is the house isn't maintained, right? You see well maintained house, junky house, well maintained. Or another way it comes up, as you could imagine, is just conversations in the neighborhood and the communities that they live in, right? It's like, oh, hey, I heard so and so died, and they're gonna kind of maybe put it in a estate sale, or so they don't know what they're gonna do. They're reaching out immediately.
okay. That makes sense. Okay, so in these situations, if I'm driving by on Hunter's Drive, is there a for sale sign outside?
No, not usually.
Not usually. You're just calling hoping that they wanna sell the
Yeah,
house.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so you just you can get their contact information publicly, so
Yeah, usually, I mean, or you could hire somebody to skip trace for you. Skip tracing is incredibly cheap. People will hire people out of the Philippines sometimes, and they charge 5 cents a skip trace.
oh, what?
I know. It's pretty easy to find people's contact information, because essentially what the skip tracer would do is they would go into county records, and then so they would find who the deed is recorded to. So now they have a name. And so then essentially from there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. You might look at some of the social sites like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, things like that. You could potentially also look at like broader sites like LexisNexis. So there's different tools that they have on there. I think one's called Apollo as well. But yeah, there's a whole business. There's a whole job title of skip tracing, and all they do is find people with a
Okay,
little bit of information.
oh, that's crazy. Okay, and like you said, like 14 out of 15 of these will lead nowhere, but that one call to somebody's great grandson who lives in Chicago is is the deal you're gonna make. And they're like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about selling it. Let's do it."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or it's we're going through a foreclosure process, and we're in the process of being foreclosed on, and they'd say, well, how much do you owe the bank? Well, because I'll pay that out for you right now, and that way you don't have to get hit by credit and all those things. You just sell it to me now. You're going to lose the property anyway. So there's a lot of ways to kind of skin the cat, but the point is that it's just another way for these people to acquire properties. But where we get tied in is once they have a verbal or written contract, that's when they're calling our company and
Gotcha,
saying, "Hey, I need you to underwrite this immediately. Double check my numbers, and then if so, like, can you guys fund this deal?"
gotcha. And you're saying you're able to do this turnover within 48 hours. How are you able to do it so quickly and give them the money? How do you make
Yeah.
that
So the reason is we're all self-funded. So what that means in our world is that we don't fund it through bank lines or bank credit or anything like that. So our company operates as a servicing entity, which is Crown Capital Resources, and then as a fund. We have a fund as well called Crown Capital Income Fund. And that's a 506c fund that we raise capital through third-party investors.
Gotcha.
The fund currently has approximately $25 million in it, and we use that capital base to deploy into projects. So we're always well capitalized. So when these projects come up, we can underwrite them. We have that liquidity immediately available. And since we underwrite everything in house, the underwriting process is like. And let me just pause there for a second. Underwriting sounds like an overly fancy word. I mean, really, what we're doing is underwriting equals evaluating. And so what we're doing is somebody will send us a property. They'll say, hey, here's the address, here's the purchase price, and here's what I think I can sell it at. And so we take a look at that data. We open up MLS and say, hey, what are the comps? Like, what have similar properties with the same square footage, stories, neighborhood, etc., sold for in the area? And say, yeah, I do agree with that after repair value. So that's underwriting. But
Right.
doing that takes all of an hour, so we can get people these term sheets out really, really quickly. And since we're already well capitalized, for us to fund, a $400,000-500,000 loan in 2 to 3 business days is like not a problem for us.
Okay, got you. And so on the flip side, how fast do you see the turnaround for you to get an ROI on your end?
So ours is a little bit interesting. Um, the way a hard money lender typically works is we charge a certain points and interest structure over here, and then we have to pay out a certain interest structure to our third party capital investors.
Okay.
And so our this is the way it works for us is our this is our spread. So and what we charge clients is 3% origination and 12% interest. Okay. Which is right in the middle of Texas hard money lenders. Um, that's 50, median market rate right there. And then we pay out our third party capital investors 10%, that we pay it out every month. And
Okay.
that's per annum, of course. And so if you think about it, it's like, okay, well, that's good. So there's a 2% arbitrage in interest from what we charge and what we pay. But the real magic in a hard money lender business is actually those origination points. Because every time we originate a deal, we get 3% off the top. And that's why hard money lenders want short duration loans. Because if we were underwriting 12-month loans over and over again, we would basically be able to make 3% interest on that capital base. But our goal is we want to flip that money 2 to 3 times a year and make 6 to 9% just on the origination. So that's why I said earlier in the podcast, I said, well, hard money lenders and the flippers are incentivized to get this done as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. Yeah,
Hard
because
money lenders because it affects our net income, and then
right,
flippers because they don't want to pay high interest. They
right.
want to get out of our high interest loan. They want to get the property renovated and back on the market as soon as possible.
So the quicker you do it, the more money you make. The 12 months is
Exactly.
not paying you the amount of money that you could make if you were doing multiple at a quicker rate. So
Exactly right. Exactly.
okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So
some.
that's so there's multiple in what we do. There are multiple streams of income, but the greatest of which is it really is it's turning over that origination fee 2 to 3 times a year. That's where the secret sauce is for a hard money lender.
That's where it lies, and you wanna do that as quickly as that's why you're able to process things so quickly, like and
Yes,
are you the person looking at this hour process of looking at the address, the purchase power, and looking at homes in the surrounding area? Are you doing that?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, 'cause I'm gonna say somebody
That's
has to do that. You know what to look for is what it sounds like.
Yeah. And we've been, both me and my business partner, we've both been in real estate for 15 years. Not, and we did hard money lending for 8, but we've been in real estate a lot longer than that. So we're very familiar, and we only lend in Texas, so we're really familiar with the different Texas markets. Um, it's also, Shelby, a really hard job to hire for one day, because that person who's doing that initial evaluation. That's kind of your frontline defense. You've got to make sure that you're actually funding really solid deals. I've heard horror stories where lenders will hire out that position and then give them a comp structure based on the amount of deals that they close.
Okay.
And so you could imagine they're way more incentivized just to close a deal than they are to look at it with the same caution that a business owner would look at it as.
Right, they're not using a fund
So
they just wanna close the deal and make it
yeah, that's right. So it's a hard one to hire for. It's going to be it will eventually be a hard role to transfer out of and for us to look at. But currently me and my business partner Jeremy are doing all the underwriting ourselves.
Got you. Yeah, I mean, it seems like the move would either be to sell to another group of business partners like you and Jeremy, or sell to a company, like, and let them buy you out, and then you have shares in the company, and you kinda are still involved, but on a, silent partner basis. It seems like those are probably the top 2 options. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, well, we're not building to sell one day, but we definitely have the conversations of what that looks like. It's interesting. There's really two different groups that purchase hard money lending companies. The first of which is another hard money lender buying a smaller hard money lender, and that looks really easy. Let's say a national hard money lender said, "Man, we really like to step into the Texas market in a big way." Well, instead of going and sending agents out there and building a name, what they typically do is they'll just buy a hard money lender and say, "Hey, we'd like to have a $50 million portfolio in Texas," as an example. We'll go buy a hard money lender with a $50 million loan book.
Got you.
So that's kind of option A. Option B is a little bit more interesting. Option B would be a family office. And so a family office would say, "Hey, we have a mandate from the principals of our family office, and we're managing $1 billion, and we want to have $100 million in a diversified stake of debt across the Texas region. And so what they would then do is they would say, okay, well, let's go buy a hard money lender who is currently at $50 million and then keep their owners on for 2 to 3 years. And then within those contracts, those houses have to stay on and make sure that we basically scale up to the 100 million. So the mandate would be we want to deploy 50 million at time zero. And then over the next year or two, we want to deploy an additional $50 million.
Gotcha.
Um,
Hang on to help them, you know, get to that number as well at the same time. I mean, you're still making money while you're still on. Like that's part of the
Yeah,
contract.
yeah. And then, just like anytime you sell a business, like there's an interim time where you have to, there's probably mandates to grow from X to YZ. And then B, there's also that transition period where you say, like, I have to make myself completely useless in this business. Right?
No, I love that. Yeah, there's so many arenas. Okay, so I want to know this. What has been your biggest success story with the client and your biggest, well, rock bottom story with the client?
Yeah. Oh man,
Maybe just a
you know,
fun
the,
one to put out
this,
there.
yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of neat things that we do, from a success standpoint. I don't know if I could point to like a particular client. I think from a success side, I just like seeing the evolution and growth of our clients. We have taken on some people that it was their first flip, and it's been really neat to see them mature and grow, and build out themselves and their company over time. And that's been a really neat thing to experience and be a part of. We've also funded some really neat things. Like we funded um, a church and community center out in Navasota, Texas,
Okay.
where it was kind of more of a commercial loan. But that was a really neat experience because as we were talking to different people on the team, whether it was the insurance agent or the broker or the client, like they were all seemed like related or they were friends, or like the insurance agent was also the mayor of the town, and like but as we dove more into the loan and got to know, it was like, oh, this, like, we're funding the revitalization of a community center. So that was a really neat experience.
That's really cool.
Um, and then, the tough ones are we've been pretty fortunate. We've only had one foreclosure in 8 years, which is
Oh,
kind of wild to say. Um, and that was a tough one. I mean, it's super stressful. It wasn't financially a headache because, like I mentioned, we typically are lending at 60 to 70% loan to value ratio. And so the foreclosure wasn't a financial blunder at all. In fact, I think we kind of broke even on it after attorney fees and all that things. But it's a headache for sure.
yeah.
It's a tough thing. So yeah, I would say that's probably like the hardest thing. The other tough thing about the business and is just uh, it when you strike out on your own and you start growing a team and hiring people. It's the realization that I'm now responsible for myself and my family's well-being. Like it's all on my shoulders. And then you also kind of realize, like, oh, the business decisions that I'm making today are also affecting my employees' livelihoods as well.
Yeah.
So I think that carries a lot of weight. I mean, to be honest with you, when you really think about it. I mean, of course, it incentivizes you to make the right business decisions and to stay humble and hungry and smart about the decisions you're making. But it's a lot to carry, especially as you build the team out over time.
Yeah, it's not just about you anymore, right? You have to think
Yeah.
about everybody else. Like every decision you make can have a domino effect on your family, on your partner, your business
Yeah.
partner, on your employees, on your team, anyone you're outsourcing and working with. So, you gotta like you can't make the kind of decisions you would make if you were just entrepreneur on your own, like with all those
Oh yeah.
extremities, it's totally different. So, okay, I want to talk about this. So, right now we're seeing a lot of millennials, a lot of Gen Zers talking about we can never afford to buy a home. It's not going to happen, right? We live in this world where eggs are high, tariffs are in town, and people are afraid of a lot of things. And like I live in Austin, right? Like I was driving the other day, and there's an area it said stop on by low 650,000. I'm not buying a low $650,000 house. Even somebody that works in tech and had a tech salary, it doesn't matter. I still could never afford that. Like it would be ridiculous for me to make that kind of decision. So, what do you have to say for Gen Zers and millennials? Like, when can they have the ideation that now's a good time to buy a house, or is buying a house not for everyone? Is a better situation for someone like me? Is like what I said, like, or I want to buy a duplex and then rent out half of it. Like, what does it look like for millennials and Gen Zers in the future? Because in the next 10 years, those are going to be your customers, or maybe they won't be
Yeah.
because they can't afford it.
Yeah. Man, that's a hard. I feel there's a 30-minute answer I could give. I'm going to try to condense it down. Well, the first thing I would say is the data absolutely supports your statement in that the purchasing power for the median salary um, does not go nearly as far as purchasing real estate. There are things over the last um, you know 30 to 50 years that have far outpaced the median salary growth in the US, and unfortunately real estate is one of those things. Unfortunately, they're like the things that you most care about, right? It's like healthcare costs, real estate, and education. Those are the things that have just like shot up and to the right, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a lot more difficult for people. And then recently, of course, what we've seen as well is um, kind of the tide that raises or lowers all boats is the interest rates as well. And so for everyone who can say, okay, well, for that $650,000 house, even if I can put 20% down, right? Even if I can go write a $130,000 check, the difference of the principal and interest payments today versus 3 years ago is so dramatic.
Right.
It's so unfortunate for buyers today. So I think I think people need to be more creative today. That without the obvious answer will be like, well, just save and maybe buy down the road. But my general opinion is that real estate prices are going to move up over time. Like there will be correction, and there has been corrections over the last 18 months. Not huge,
Mhm.
but I generally think housing prices will move up into the right. And so your idea about the duplex is interesting. So have you ever heard of the Burr method?
No, tell me about this. No.
Okay, so a lot of our investors do this. It's kind of a hack in the real estate world. So effectively, what Burr stands for is buy, rehab, rent, refinance.
Okay.
Okay, so and I'll walk you through some numbers. So let's say somebody goes out and they say, I want to buy a duplex. And so we'll talk about this in investment property perspective, but we can talk about it at home later. uh, if I'm going to go out, or let's just do a single family home because it's a little bit easier. So I want to go out and buy a single family home, and I can purchase it for $100,000, and I can put $50,000 into it, and then my after repair value will be $250,000, right?
Okay.
So they pair up with a hard money lender. They put $15,000 down, and then interest payments are $1,500 a month, right? So there's a down payment cost which is substantially lower. There's interest payment, and you go and you renovate this property. You do cabinets, flooring, you fix some electrical, you do all the things. And then what you do is you go to a DSCR lender, a debt service coverage ratio lender. And you say, hey, I want to refinance this property out of the hard money loan world and into a long term low interest rate environment. Low in quotations.
Right.
Well, not 12%. And so what they do is they come out there and they say, okay, well, let's go get it appraised. So then they go get the property appraised and say, yeah, we based on our comps, I think it's worth $250,000. Okay. So, and then number two, they say is, do you cover a debt service coverage ratio of 1 or greater? Which basically means does the rent that you're bringing in cover your principal, interest, and property taxes?
Okay.
So those two things are check marks, which is relatively easy to do if you buy right, of course. So then they go and they say, hey, so we think the property is worth $250,000 today. Okay, we're going to give you a loan of 80% of that. So you take $250,000 times 0.8, and so they would go and they would give you back $200,000, right, and then 50,000 of which would be as equity in the property.
Okay.
So now you have $250,000 in principal. We need to be paid back, so we're paid back at $150,000. You now have $50,000 of net cash less the down payment that you paid, the interest payment that you paid, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a way for people to acquire properties with a really, really low cash down perspective. So in your case is an interesting one as well. Like you could do that same thing to set up a buy box, contact real estate agents, and say, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Run the rental comps, purchase it and renovate it with hard money. And then you could basically go on the tail end, go get it reappraised, rented, and then end up with a property with like $30,000 down. And then now you own a property. So instead of the scenario A, where you went with a traditional lender and you bought a stabilized property and you had to come out of pocket for, let's say $120,000, you've now been able, you had to do some work, you had to renovate and things like that, but it's a way for you to get into a property with substantially less down. And people are doing this all the time. It's amazing. A big segment of our clients do the Burr method over and over again. So they're purchasing properties that will ultimately be rentals. They're purchasing it and rehabbing it with our capital. And then they're going and getting it reappraised, pulling that cash out, paying us off, and then ending up with a rental property.
Got
And
you.
they
And
do it over and over.
having some cash in their pocket at the same time.
Yeah.
You're such a low barrier to entry, putting down 15,000 and then the $1,500 a month in interest. How long are they paying that interest for, that $1,500 a month?
Well, it's until they pay us back. And what we like to see is 6 months, right? So, hey, you got to get in there, you got to renovate it immediately. You got to start the DSCR process, because usually that process is about 30 days. So you want to start that as soon as possible. So 6 months would be kind of getting after it, but people do it all the time.
Got you. So I gave you $15,000. I'm giving you the $1,500 a month interest rate until I go get the house reappraised and you get your money back. And then I would get that 30,000 return. And now I own the property. I can put that into I just bought a property basically for 30K.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It almost doesn't sound real.
Right. It doesn't.
I know, it almost, but I promise you, we have one client who's built a rental portfolio of 30 single family rentals doing this over and over again with us. So he'll fund with us, he'll renovate the property, he'll go get it reappraised, do a DSCR loan on it, cash us out, and go do another one.
That's amazing. I'm highly intrigued in this.
It is. It's amazing. I mean, like it sounds too good to be true, but yeah, and of course you have to find the right deal. And like the example I gave where it's like, hey, you actually net came out some pocket back. Like there's also the scenario where the rehab, like you opened up a wall and it was like, oh, okay, we found some stuff we didn't expect. That's we got to add another $20,000 to the rehab. I mean, I'm giving you a very idyllic scenario. I mean, things
Right.
go wrong, but the general process is it absolutely works, and we see it over and over and over again because we're the funding side of it. We love to fund our clients on these things. It's like, yeah, it's easy.
Well, I will definitely keep this in mind because I think it's very
Yeah,
amazing. So I will keep that in mind when I'm ready to make a decision like this. I have two more questions for you. My next
yeah,
question is,
yeah.
do you ever want to land outside of Texas?
Well, we can't. So we made a strategic decision when we created the income fund. So it's a SEC uh, uh, fund. It's a fund under the SEC's purview. So you have to give specific definitions as to what you can and cannot invest in. One of the strategic decisions we made was we will only lend in Texas, and we did it for three reasons. The first of which is myself and Jeremy live in Texas. We're Texas born. We'll live here the rest of our lives, so that's kind of easy. The second reason was that Texas has really favorable lender laws. So if somebody misses an interest payment with us, we will immediately send a demand letter. And once that demand letter's sent, we can foreclose on that property as quick as 43 days in Texas.
Damn.
There are some states where that's a 12-month process, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
So that's the second reason we said, like, we're not interested in going into these other states that are very, very, very like not friendly to lenders. And then the third reason is that the market is massive in Texas, right? So our goal this year is to double. We started this year the fund at 20 million. We want to get to 40 million by the end of the year. Even if we were to double to 40 million, we would have 0.3% of the market share in Texas.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's crazy. So that's the reason we were like, well, there's no reason. It's not like we need to go move into Tennessee and Arizona and Louisiana in order to grow. It was like, well, we can very much grow in here. In fact, we can double in here and nobody would even notice.
Right.
It's
There's
that level.
no need. There's no need because the opportunity is limitless.
Yeah,
Honestly, there's so
that's right.
if it's point what you said 0.13 like that you have so much space. You can just you could pass away and your son or daughter could grow the business and continue.
Oh yeah. Oh
There,
yeah. No problem.
there's so much opportunity. Okay, my last question, and I asked my last guest this last week. So let's talk about tariffs. How is that affecting the real estate business as a whole, the real estate lending business? I know maybe not so much you, but how's it affecting the industry as a whole? And where do you see it going? Because it's the talk of the town right now. Everybody wants to know how's it going to affect them.
Um, okay, so how it's affecting the market today, generally speaking, both the equities market, the real estate market, general investor sentiment is, I would say, I would characterize it as just concern of the unknown, right? And even when the election was happening, people were talking about which candidate would be better. And my argument was like, well, either candidate will be better for business because there is now a known uncertainty. Like the market and people just don't like unknown. They don't like uncertainty. And so I think with the tariffs, what's going on is like we haven't talked about as an administration, we haven't talked about tariffs to this level in decades, right? And the question is on a long-term basis is, well, what would this really look like? So I think April 1st is the first date where we start to implement reciprocal tariffs.
Okay.
I mean, there is a world in which, you know, that happens and then other countries start backing off some of their tariffs, and then it kind of ends up becoming a non-issue. But it could also go the other way in which there's more like trade wars that come up. So what we see in general is people don't like the uncertainty, and investors, if our clients are coming to us, the people who are flipping the houses, and they're saying, I want to lock in a property, what they're betting on is that market conditions will be as good or better 6 months from now,
Yeah.
right? Because if they're worried about that and if they're saying, I think market conditions are going to be worse 6 months from now, it's going to make them a lot more skittish to even taking on that project. And so what we saw was interesting. We saw in the data pre-election, we had some really slow months. A lot of our clients weren't taking on new projects. We saw that, and then post-election in end of December, January and February. January, February are our biggest months we've ever had. There was
What?
kind of a huge renewed optimism in the market. And then what we've seen in March is a bit of a, not a bit, it's a reversal from that. People kind of a little bit more uncertainty. So I think that's mainly what it is today. Long term, what could it really look like? I'm generally a person that I like to take both sides of the argument. And with this one, it's really interesting. I mean, in economics, we always heard about we always kind of were taught tariffs were bad and globalization is good because it condenses the price of goods and services. It opens you up to a global market, which ultimately is a deflationary effect for consumers. But now, I always try to look at it from both sides, and it's like, well, what's the straw man argument to that, right? So, and it's like, well, I guess the bad thing about globalization is you offshore a lot of your industries, and some things are probably fine to offshore, but there are critical industries like chip manufacturing and healthcare manufacturing and medicines and things like that, where from a strategic position, you would never want to offshore those things.
No.
So I don't know. It's hey, listen, it's a global experiment going on right now. So we'll
We'll see.
see kind of on net what it ends up being. I think there's a decent chance that it kind of ends up being a nothing burger. If we start implementing reciprocal tariffs and other countries look at it and go, yeah, maybe we'll just back off our tariffs, and it could just be a whole lot of worry for nothing. But
Wait, so you
um,
tell people what
it's
reciprocal
something I'm interested in. I love economics, so I'm just kind of watching it unfold, and I want to see what ends up happening with it.
Yeah, some people think it's literally hell in a handbasket, but I mean, tell people what is a reciprocal tariff. I don't think a lot of people know what that means. Tell them what that means.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll use Canada as an example. There, anytime goods or services move across the country, there's some or sometimes not a tariff imposed on that. So like an easy example would be like if Canada sends exports wood or like maple syrup or steel or aluminum from Canada to the United States, the government on a federal level might impose an additional tariff and say, hey, we're actually going to tariff this. And some of the ones that when you read about are they seem a little bit nominal, like 10%, but there are some that are like 200 to 300%. And so what this administration has basically said and this is like my rudimentary understanding, I'll admit, but is to basically say like, hey, if you're going to impose these high tariffs on us, we're basically going to reciprocate with that same percentage amount back to you. And the reason, quantitatively, the reason the United States is theoretically in a better bargaining position is because a very small percentage of our GDP actually is based in exports. Like we're not an export rich country.
Right.
So if we lose the capacity to export, it's like 4% of our GDP versus, let's just call it countries in NAFTA, Canada and Mexico. It's a
Right.
much higher percentage of their GDP. So they're hyper aware of the net income that exports are bringing into their country. So for them, they're in a, and then what that translates to is they're just in a weaker
We're gonna see.
negotiating position.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I mean, we're just gonna see how it plays out. But
Yeah.
I can see why people in the real estate industry as a whole are looking at things and scaling back. But at the same time,
Yes.
I mean, we saw a lot of things happen like this during the pandemic where prices went up, and if people are still going to go ahead and make purchases, why would we lower the price?
Yeah. Well, that's one thing. It's interesting. We just put together some data for the real estate markets here in Texas, and it was so like when you're going in, you're reading the article. The headline of the article is like "Struggled Real Estate Market in 2025, Trouble Ahead," and like they seem really bad. But when you actually amalgamate all the data and you look at all the big players and you look at their forecasts and you average it all, it's like there's on average everyone's expecting it was like 1.9% year over year increase in houses. And
Oh,
it's like that's not a bad market. We've just been used to this like terrible market of 6 to 8% increase in prices year over year, which is flat out not sustainable. Like me as a business owner, I think that's good. It helps increase my margin. But me as a person and somebody who's going to be moving here in the next year, and even for friends who don't own a home yet, like that's not a sustainable thing for younger generations. It's
yeah,
terrible because it's not like you're getting a 6 to 8% year over year increase in your salary.
right. So
So
it's not going to work.
it perpetuates that trend like we talked about earlier in the podcast where younger people are farther and farther away from buying a house.
So much farther away. And also,
Yeah.
like looking at the numbers, like a lot of Gen Zers and millennials are single. They don't have a
Yeah.
partner. So the idea of buying a home by yourself, yes, people are doing it. That seems to be the way people want to move. But cost of living can be cut down if you have a partner that you can go into it with. But
For sure.
those numbers have shrunk tremendously. People aren't getting married. People aren't meeting anyone. People are in transitional cities. Austin is a transitional city. People move here for their job and then they move to the next city. So it's very hard to even tie down a partner or even develop a family unit. So buying a house isn't on my mind. Somebody like me who's bound to move, who's bound to relocate at some point.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things go into it, but like you said, we'll just see what happens. We'll just see. We'll just see how it goes, David. But thank you so
Yeah.
much for being on the show. Tell people where they can find your business, how they can contact you. Let us know where can we go to partner with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my personal work email is david@crowncapitalresources.com. The website is the same, crowncapitalresources.com. And yeah, I would say if anyone is interested in and talking about real estate or potentially needing some funding, I'm happy to talk about it. If somebody just has some questions about me and a little bit more of my journey, you're thinking about starting a lending company, I'm more than happy to jump on a call and help out as well any way I can. I'm a pretty open book about what is good and bad and both personal and life and business. So yeah, definitely want all the listeners to know. Don't feel free to don't feel bad about reaching out. I'm happy to talk.
For sure. Hit David up. David, I think you're great. Yes, I loved having you on the show. This was very, very informative. I learned a lot. I think everyone who's going to tune in after is going to learn a lot. Definitely think you should be doing more of these podcasts, be on panels. I don't know if you've heard of FinCon, but FinCon is a financial expo for people in the financial industry who just love the content and the ideation around it. You'd be a great panelist for FinCon. It's going to be in Portland in September. So I
Okay.
think you're still looking for panelists. You should FinCon Expo 2025. Like people would love to have you. Like you should. My plan is to buy a ticket to go. You should definitely apply and be someone to be at the
Okay.
conference to get sponsored. So I'm just gonna put that out there. I think it'd be a
I
great.
love it.
I would love to. Oh my God, my parents are commenting in the chat and they're saying that you did an amazing job. So
Oh,
very
that's generous. Thank you.
they really enjoyed it. Okay, well, everybody, thank you. This is going to be live. You can check this out on YouTube and then on all the podcast streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, Castbox. It'll be going live in the next 1 to 2 weeks. Remember, the podcast shows premiere every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, depending on what I have time for, but always on a Tuesday at 8 a.m. CST. So everybody, let's give David a round of applause. Thank you again, David. I'm your host, Shelbie
Thank you.
of the Hustle Budget and Glow podcast. Peace out, everybody. Again, I'm holding it down here in Austin, Texas. Go Cougs. I hope you guys win the Final Four. With that, I'm going to go ahead and exit the room. But thank you, everybody. And I hope you enjoyed the show. David, thank you again. Peace and have a great and amazing weekend.